So have you ever really stopped to think about who actually pays for a tax? You might think it's simple, but it's not. In this explainer, we're going to use a couple of simple graphs to pull back the curtain and show you the hidden economics behind where that money really goes.
Let's kick things off with a question that honestly trips up a ton of people when they first start digging into economics. I mean, if the price of something like cheese goes up, shouldn't the whole demand for it just change? It feels intuitive, right? But the answer reveals a really important rule about how all of this works.
All right, to solve that little cheese puzzle, we first have to get our heads around the idea that these supply and demand graphs are telling two completely different kinds of stories. One story is about just moving along a path that's already there, and the other is about the entire path changing completely.
Okay, so here's the absolute key difference. A price change is kind of like walking up or down a staircase that's already built. The staircase itself, your general desire for that product, it doesn't move. But an external factor, like, say, you get a big raise at work, that's like someone picking up the entire staircase and moving it to a whole new spot.
So let's go back to our cheese. When the price goes up, the basic fact that you like cheese hasn't changed one bit. You just move to a new point on that same demand curve. You just decide to buy a little less of it because, well, it costs more. That's a movement.
But what if a big new health study comes out that says cheese is terrible for you? Well, suddenly, you're way less interested in cheese, no matter what the price tag says. That's an external factor, and bam, it literally shifts your entire demand curve over to the left.
And this whole idea of shifting, this is where things start to get really cool. It shows us that no market is an island. A change in one little corner of the economy can create these huge ripple effects somewhere else entirely.
Okay, so let's play detective and trace the chain reaction here. We're going to start with just one simple change in the tea market, and we'll see just how far those ripples travel.
You can literally watch the dominoes fall here. Tea gets cheaper, so more people start drinking it. And since all those people are now getting their morning caffeine fix from tea, they're buying less coffee. So that change in the tea market became the big external factor that shifted the entire demand curve in the coffee market. See how that works?
So now, let's take everything we've just learned and apply it to one of the biggest external factors out there, government intervention. We're about to see exactly what happens to a market when a tax gets thrown into the mix.
You know, a tax is kind of the ultimate external factor, isn't it? It's not some natural change in the market. It's a brand new cost that's imposed from the outside, and it forces everyone in that market to react.
All right. We always start with our baseline, a simple, balanced market. The price is just chilling right where buyers and sellers naturally agree it should be. That sweet spot where the supply and demand curves cross.
Okay, now pay close attention, because this is the critical part. In economics, a tax is treated like an extra cost of production. And what that means is that it only affects the people making the stuff, the producers. So it's their supply curve that shifts up and to the left. Notice the buyer's demand curve hasn't moved an inch.
And believe it or not, that one simple shift in the supply curve kicks off this ripple effect that has three immediate and predictable consequences for how much stuff gets sold, for the price you pay, and for the money the producer actually gets to keep. So what's the fallout? Well, number one, fewer things get sold in the market, period. Number two, the price you see at the register goes up. And number three, the amount of money the seller actually pockets after paying the government goes down.
Which of course brings us to the most fascinating question of all. When the government slaps a tax on something, who actually ends up footing the bill? This is what economists call the tax wedge. And you can see exactly how it works. The price for the consumer doesn't just jump up by the full tax amount. Instead, that burden gets split. The consumer ends up paying a little bit more, the producer keeps a little bit less, and that gap in the middle, well, that's what the government gets.
And that is the single most important thing to remember here. A tax isn't just some extra cost that gets passed on to the buyer. Nope, it's a wedge that simultaneously drives the price up for you and the revenue down for them.
But hold on, there's one final, really important piece to this puzzle. It turns out that the impact of a tax isn't always the same. The actual shape of that demand curve plays a huge role in deciding who feels the most pain. So if demand is elastic, which just means it's a flatter curve, it means you're super sensitive to price changes. A small tax can make sales plummet because people just stop buying. But if demand is inelastic, a really steep curve, it means people need that item no matter what. Think gasoline or medicine. A tax barely changes how much they buy.
So what's the bottom line here? That simple line on a graph tells a deep story about our choices. The steeper that curve is, the less you're willing to change your behavior, and the more of that tax you're probably going to end up paying. It's this hidden economic battle going on under the surface that determines the true cost of just about everything.